let's jump right into the first story. And the first story is China, Japan, South Korea discuss trilateral cooperation. So this took place actually yesterday, so March 22nd, and today's the 23rd. This was a meeting that took place between the foreign ministers from Japan, China, and South Korea, and they're looking for cooperation, basically because of the U.S., I would say. But we'll get into that. That'll be my opinion. Let's first look at the kind of story here. And it says, foreign ministers from Japan, China, and South Korea sought trilateral cooperation and common ground in areas like aging, declining birth rates, natural disasters, and the green economy at a meeting that took place at a time of growing tensions. So basically, these three nations, the foreign ministers, decided that things are changing in the world and we maybe need to have a discussion about it, because if the United States is becoming a less reliable partner, then South Korea and Japan will have to reevaluate their position when it comes to China, because there are many differences on all sides, and everybody has their own opinion about what should or shouldn't be done between these three countries. China has deep resentment towards Japan because of the Sino-Japanese War, which predated World War II. It started much earlier. And South Korea also has the same issues with Japan about the Sino-Japanese War. Japan has never really officially apologized, at least not in a sufficient way, for the atrocities that they committed. I've even been to the Nanjing Museum, and what happened there was horrific, and China has every right to demand an apology and every right to be upset. Korea also, many awful things happened. So on that side, China and Korea are kind of allies. But then there was the Korean War. And so South Korea doesn't necessarily like China because of the actions during the Korean War and the fact that China still, to this day, supports North Korea, which they believe is only a country because of China's intervention. So there's a lot of different angles between this, which has a lot of history, but because the United States has shown its inability to lead the world at this time, its inability to support its allies, whether it's Europe or Canada, let alone all the way across the Pacific to Japan and South Korea, the Japanese government and the South Korean government are starting to look at, smoothing some of the tensions between their biggest threat or partner, depending on how you look at it. I was saying in the last live stream that I think that Asia should have its own cooperation, that it should try to govern itself outside of the influence of the United States. And I was saying that I suspected that more nations would start to engage with China in a different manner if they feel that the United States may not support them. I was saying possibly the Philippines, possibly Japan, possibly South Korea, possibly Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, even Thailand, or any of the nations that are here in Asia, and specifically in kind of like Southeast Asia, where a lot of those countries have trading partners with China, but they haven't necessarily been on good terms with the Chinese government. So now we might see a little bit of a change, and that's exactly what we're seeing with this trilateral cooperation. And I think if you see Japan and South Korea making a move, then the smaller nations might, maybe not smaller, but the less powerful in terms of when we think of like the military, or we think of closeness to the United States. If the big players like Japan, which has basically been a vassal state in South Korea of the United States for the last 80 years since the end of World War II, if they are saying, hey, things aren't looking good, then other nations in this area might also start to change how they approach China and how their foreign relations adjust to kind of what's going to be apparently the new normal. So this article was talking about some of the differences. And so Japan and South Korea are obviously still weary about North Korea and China's support of North Korea because it is unpredictable at times. We've seen throughout history that North Korea has been pursuing a nuclear missile and nuclear power. They want nuclear weapons. And so they've been trying to develop that. And they have not been shy about launching missiles out towards Japan and close to, South Korea. Hasn't been recently, but for a while there was every few months you would get a news report of North Korea launching a missile that could possibly carry a nuclear warhead. And so obviously that's a big issue for Japan and South Korea. They also are concerned about North Korea supporting Russia. So if we keep going down, as for the China side, Foreign Minister Wang said China supports the formation of a mutual regional economy and proposed resuming talks on the economic framework for the three countries and promoting an expansion of the 15-nation regional comprehensive economic partnership. So China's saying, let's do trade. This is what they've been saying pretty much since their rise is let's trade, let's make money. We have lots of manufacturing, let's work together. But that doesn't mean that China is just ready to go. They also have their concerns, like I said, about kind of the history. There's also island disputes still ongoing. It used to be a big issue a while back. The South China Sea was the big hot topic before they kind of just switched everything to Taiwan. But there are still island disputes. So there is quite a bit happening. But it's really interesting. And here's a second article saying that it's a turning point in history. And this is what the foreign minister of Japan said, that it's a turning point in history. And, this is what I was saying in the last stream, and I'll say it again. I do think that the multipolar world is going to be taking shape around certain countries. So China is going to be the Asian pole in terms of multipolarism. There's no one else. So it's China or no one. They're the second largest economy in the world based on dollar terms. If you base it on purchasing parity, it's the largest economy in the world. And so China is here. Despite what the United States wants to do, China is here. And I think that we will see more and more nations kind of deciding which way to go. And for the last 80 years, the United States has been the safe bet because the United States, regardless of how you feel about it, was the economic and military power of this planet. And that's why they could throw their weight around, because they had the ability to do that. They also had pursued policies that, although they were beneficial to the United States, they were often beneficial to the countries that they dealt with. Security agreements with Japan and South Korea allowed for Japan and South Korea to have 80 years of essentially peacetime. The Korean War happened, but it wasn't that long. And since then, it's been in a state of, yes, they're technically at war with North Korea, but they're in a place of peace where there's very few border scrimmages. They've been able to develop their economy and their country. Same with Japan. There's been almost no threats from any other regional power. And so it has been beneficial. But if the United States is going to actually throw its allies under the bus, well, the bus that's coming along in Asia is China. And I'm not saying that China's just going to steamroll over everyone. Obviously, they've proven that they want to have fair and bilateral negotiations. They want to trade. They just want some of their grievances to be addressed and dealt with in a proper way to kind of smooth over some of the history. 80 years is not that long. If you think back to the end of World War II, it's about 80 years ago, right? 45 to 25, that's like 80 years. And people remember that. People remember growing up having stories from their parents and their grandparents of what happened. It's not easy to forget. And China is known for being patient and remembering. So until those issues are addressed, I don't know how far these can go, how far these trilateral or bilateral or any type of lateral agreements can go. But I think it's promising, and I also see, like the article was saying, that this could be a turning point, specifically for Asia, because the United States might not always be there. And even if it is there, we have a story later, it may not be free. And it's a story about Taiwan that we will get into later. But even if the United States is there, it may not truly be there. It may not be your ally to the end. It might be your ally to the end of your checkbook, or until it has received what it finds valuable, which we're seeing with Ukraine. So that's the first story, and it just happened like yesterday, so those were just my initial thoughts. Hopefully this can go somewhere, because if it can, then we might see some shifts in kind of the traditional alliances, which I hope will lead to a stronger Asia and a stronger a stronger Asia, a stronger bloc that has, the world's largest population when you add up all the different nations, and now the largest economies in the world. So it should have, I think, more say in kind of the global sphere, specifically in Asia, but also the global, because they have the weight in the people. And if they're actually making adjustments that help people, then I say I'm all for it. If you like that clip from the live stream, consider becoming a member and joining the community, where every week I will be doing live streams talking about the latest news from the US, Europe, and China. About 50% of the content will be uploaded to the general audience, but 50 to 60% will remain only for members only. So if you want to see so much more than just these little clips, be sure to become a member, and I hope to see you in the chat during the next live stream.